It feels like every other week is the perfect time to talk about how the AAA games industry is collapsing. It's not really a trending topic anymore, it's just a very plain, understood fact. Even though the discourse around it can feel a little bit ridiculous and miscalibrated at times, everyone who spends even a fraction of their time playing video games is well aware that something is wrong with the core of the industry, and it's been that way for a while. You probably remember articles from back in 2020 that covered former Sony Interactive chairman Sean Layden's comments on AAA budgets, where he said that the increase in cost from generation to generation was simply unsustainable, with each console cycle doubling the average cost of making a cutting-edge video game. It's like an evil Moore's law. Instead of the quality doubling every 2 years at a relatively fixed cost, the quality is plateauing as the cost doubles. It's literally the worst situation you could possibly be in as an industry. A few years later, Layden's comments would resurface in response to the brutal Insomniac leaks, which, among other very damaging things, exposed the company's budgets and profit margins for their games. And as it turned out, Insomniac spent over $300 million on Spider-Man 2, which doesn't include marketing, mind you, and internally projected the game to make them, all in all, a total of $75 million. Which, don't get me wrong, $75 million is a lot of money, but that's not a crazy return on investment for what at this moment in time is Sony's fastest-selling game ever. Even wilder than Spider-Man 2's insane budget, though, was Insomniac's estimates for their upcoming games, which were starting to scrape $400 million each, although they did seem to have some confidence that these projects would have a higher profit margin than Spider-Man 2. And this doesn't seem to be an anomaly. In fact, the numbers matched up almost exactly with Layden's comments before and after this leak that claimed that top-of-the-line AAA games during the PS4 era, where he was actively involved with PlayStation, sat at budgets of about $150 million, which meant in his words, by that math, PS5 games should eventually reach $300 million to $400 million, and that is just outright not sustainable. And we've seen that to be the case. Every year is breaking records for the number of layoffs in the games industry and game companies being shut down. I mean, just a few weeks back, Microsoft shut down a ton of big projects and studios. Before that, it was Monolith and Arcane Austin and Volition. Even in the 2 days I took in between writing and recording this video, Contraband just got cancelled. This topic of video games industry panic is not a bug, it's a feature, which is why it pops back every few weeks like a cokehead cousin. So why am I talking about it now? If it's so consistent and so overdone, why does any of this matter? It's all the same stuff with the same solutions, right? AAA is dying, go play indies. Yeah, ChatGPT-ass video. But 2025 has progressed in a very interesting way that I think makes this topic worth revisiting. Specifically, it's been arguably the best year ever for AA or mid-budget games, with massive hits from outside the traditional AAA pipeline, games like Clair Obscur, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and Lies of P Overture, with a lot of eyes also on Hell Is Us and Judas, if that ever ends up coming out. It's a little hard to distinguish AA from AAA by any exact metrics, but exact classification aside, these are all games that, by all accounts, cost significantly less than high-end AAA games. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, a potentially 100-plus hour campaign with a ton of replayability and an absolutely massive script, cost about $40 million to make, pennies compared to what was leaked for Spider-Man 2. And although it didn't sell the same amount of units, the estimated profits in just the first few months are already approaching Spider-Man 2's estimated net profit. And just to be super clear, a lot of this stuff is unofficial, these estimates are not always the most accurate, and also having similar net profit but more units sold is huge for things like brand awareness, selling more consoles, developing that prestige catalog, and leveraging success into producing spin-offs and adaptations. Who knows, maybe the Spider-Man guy will get a cool TV show or something. But if you look at these two side by side in terms of which one feels like it can maintain its current strategy longer, I'll take the one that turned a profit within 24 hours instead of the one that had to break records just to not be considered a complete failure. Clair Obscur has completely dominated games discourse for the last few months. In a really strong year for new releases, it's been the game to talk about. And it not only did it with an estimated budget of under $20 million, but with a studio filled with people who walked away from AAA's biggest punching bag. Lies of P, both this year and when it was originally released, proved that a smaller team with a smaller budget could come out of nowhere and go toe-to-toe with a major studio at the top of its game, and all it took was for like 80 other studios to fail at it first. AA-style games were for so long the theoretical solution to the AAA budget problem, Layden himself even mentioning that moving back to shorter games and tighter dev cycles was the only way traditional single-player games could continue, and this year has absolutely been the best promo for that line of thinking. AA games are working, and it does seem like it's well past time for bigger studios to take notice. That all said, I'm gonna burst some bubbles real quick. As easy as it is to say that AAA games should just do what AA games are doing, I also think they kind of can't. This is a bit of a false equivalency, an argument built off of convenient examples and unfair extrapolation of data. Because first of all, it's worth mentioning that while AA games do seem to be thriving, they're also under a lot less scrutiny than AAA games are. If a AA game comes out and it's bad, but not generationally bad, it just falls conveniently out of the news cycle. Hell, it likely never made the news cycle to begin with. But when a Concord or Star Wars Outlaws, games that are still competently built despite being kind of bland, fails to meet sales expectations, it's a public execution. Everyone sees it and makes fun of it and says, "You stupid dev, why'd you spend $4 bazillion on Guardians of the Overwatch?" This comparison is inherently, at least partially, not in good faith. The AA games I'm highlighting here are outlier success stories, and they are getting more common, but if I compare them to an outlier success story in AAA, like Elden Ring, all of a sudden it feels like these are little baby games winning little baby game prizes. While I do think that AAA is clearly struggling almost across the board, to say that they'd be fine if they just lowered their budgets and, my favorite argument, hired devs who are actually passionate doesn't really reflect the reality of the situation. In fact, just recently, Glenn Schofield, the creator of Dead Space, talked about how him and his daughter failed to secure funding for their moderately sized new horror game. Starting at a budget of $17 million, and despite being met with good responses, were asked to drop that number lower and lower until it hit $2 to $5 million, and they decided to drop it. And for some reason, people interpreted this as the $17 million version being AAA and the $2 to $5 million version being AA, and they made fun of him for being horny for AAA and not accepting a smaller scale title. But like, this was the smallest. He literally did what people want someone like him to do. This was never pitched as a AAA project. There's no AA game that I can track down that has a budget south of $5 million. This was a perfectly admirable and honest conversation about what people seem to want AAA devs to do, but because people are a little bit lukewarm on Glenn Schofield, I guess they decided to throw it in his face for some reason. Which I think exposes the biggest thing stopping AAA devs from scaling back a little, and that's honestly us. Obviously not to justify poor management and ridiculous sales expectations from companies and instead blame the consumer, that's not the goal here, but let's be honest for a second. A lot of people love to say that they don't really care about graphics, or at least graphics getting more impressive than they are now. But if Rockstar or Sucker Punch looked at their dev cycles and said, "Damn, this shit takes too long, we gotta lower our budget and have a quicker turnaround," how would people realistically react if GTA 7 or Ghost of Tsushima were visual downgrades from their predecessors? I mean, that just seems like it would be a death warrant. For all of the talk about graphics not really being important, I guarantee if these games shifted to a lower gear for the sequel, they'd be ripped to shreds. Even if you personally feel like you still wouldn't care, the overwhelming majority of fans are casual and don't pay attention to budgets and layoffs. They just see what they see, and if they see something that looks more modest, the game is limiting its chances at success. The games industry has set an impossible standard for itself that it can't back out of. Consumers don't want games to look worse, they also don't want to pay more money for games than they already have been, they also don't want everything to be filled with microtransactions, and they also still crave long games, as evidenced by all of the most successful single-player content of the last 15 years. And all of these are valid feelings, but they also have trapped the industry in a web of its own creation. No matter how it tries to escape, AAA games feel like they're on an undeniable collision course. They have made the bed where they lay, they didn't address the right things in the right ways at the right time, and I genuinely don't see a scenario where we aren't set for a massive market crash within the next 10 years. I think it's too late for AAA games to restructure into something more cost-conscious, but hopefully when it all crashes and burns, from that wreckage it can be reborn into the model that we're seeing glimpses of now. The biggest challenge then would just to be not to fall back into the scope creep that's admittedly starting to affect even lower budget games now, but that's a topic for another time. All I know is, if we can stumble onto some solution for making these the norm, the games industry industry would probably be in a much healthier, sustainable state in the long run. Anyways, if you want to see a much more positive video about games, and you're on the lookout for more stuff about Clair Obscur specifically, my friend Landon, aka the other half of Code Cleric, has a really great video on the film and art influences on that game. It's really great, I highly recommend it. Subscribe here for more video essay speedruns, join the Discord, it's in the description, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.